Hey everybody, Rob Montgomery here from Climb. Today what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick look at the user interface of the Climb TMS system, but we're going to do it from the point of view of an instructor. So let's go ahead and dive in and actually see what's going to happen. Imagine that you're going ahead and you log into the system itself, right? You're going to land on a page that looks a whole lot like this. Now, this is your Watch Students page, and we're going to spend a lot of time here dealing with the Watch Students page and all the different sub-pages that are underneath it. But let's look around really quick and see what else we have access to. One of the things that you're going to notice is I still have the My Learning menu. Because just because you're an instructor doesn't mean that you can't also be a student. So you can still do all the things that a student can do. You can still enroll in courses, complete training, fly with other instructors, do all kinds of stuff. Because let's be realistic, we're in aviation. Aviation is a constant barrage of different training programs that we have to go through as we're building our skill set. However, once you've been authorized by a flight school in Climb as an instructor, right? So if your flight school uses Climb, or if you're the chief instructor and you sign up for Climb and then you authorize yourself, you're going to see this thing called the My Teaching menu. And underneath that My Teaching menu is where we're going to get a lot of instructor-specific capabilities. And we'll kind of do a bottom-up here to kind of talk really quickly about what's out there. One of the things we have is we have an app, right? The app runs on either iOS devices like iPads or iPhones, or it also runs on Android devices, right? And what it allows you to do is it allows you, when you go out and do flight activities with students, you can load the flight activity on the app. You can then go out and fly, potentially losing internet access. But while you're out flying, you can collect Hobbs times, you can grade maneuvers, you can write comments, you can do all kinds of note-taking within the system. As soon as you come back into range, right, as soon as you get connected to Wi-Fi again, all that data is going to automatically get uploaded to the cloud, and it's going to show up right here in your Climb TMS system. So it's a really kind of neat system. It's a great way to make it very simple. That being said, everything we do in the app, we can also do on the website. So if you prefer paper or you prefer, some other method of keeping track of things, of course, you can always just use the website directly. Right? Next thing up we have is something called the Flight Instruction Summary. And what this is this is a summary of your experience as a flight instructor. You see, because what happens is most flight instructors, we have career plans. Maybe we want to go become a chief instructor somewhere. Maybe we want to become an assistant chief or a chief at a 141 school. Maybe we want to become a designated pilot examiner. Maybe we're just going on to that airline interview where they're going to ask you a lot of questions about what your experience is and what kind of teaching you've been doing. And it'd be really good to have some nice numbers to go along with this, right? And so what we do is we track a lot of data here around what kind of teaching are you doing, how often are you flying, how many hours per month are you doing, how does it, if you do it long enough, how does it vary year from year, so you can start to understand the heartbeat of your career as a flight instructor. And above that, we see what we call our instruction history. And this is a little bit different. So this is focused on exactly what have you taught as an instructor. And this is more in terms of professional defense, if you will. So, imagine here we are, 5 years after you last saw your student, all of a sudden they're involved in a runway incursion. And somebody comes to you and says, well, did you ever teach them about runway incursions? I don't remember if I taught about runway incursions, right? We all have lots of students that people come and go. We have the same conversations fairly regularly, right? It's really hard to just commit to memory and promise, oh yeah, absolutely, I did that. So instead, what we do is we keep track of everything that you've done. They say, did you talk to the student about runway incursions? You go find the activity on runway incursions for that student, and you can say, you know what? Not only did I talk to that student on this exact date, we talked, I graded them this exact way. Here's the quiz, by the way, that covered that material. Here's the reading assignment that covered that material. And you can build a very strong defense that says, yes, I did my job as a flight instructor. I taught them the material that they're required to learn. Right? So that's kind of a cool thing to have. And then, of course, we have the Schools tab, My Schools. My Schools lets you see all the schools that have authorized you as a flight instructor, right? What they can also do is this is the place where if you're in an administrative type of role, so like if you're a chief pilot or you're a flight school admin, this is where you would go ahead and click on the big yellow button, and it would allow you to go in and actually start, managing your flight school, adding instructors, removing instructors, changing instructor roles, offering courses for sale, structuring pricing, all kinds of things like that are going to happen through the flight school management tab. And then we get into the all students list. So this is a list of all the students. Now, if we go back to the My Schools tab, I only have been authorized by one school, but you can actually be authorized by multiple schools. And there's a couple different ways in which that could happen. One is maybe you teach at a school, but then you do a little bit of work on the side. you could set up your own independent school, right? Another thing that might happen is you might have a couple of jobs. We're also starting to see some interest from people about having remote schools. So the idea is that I'm a content developer who creates a very specific, specialized training program, and I want to go out there and start certifying instructors. And then I actually want to manage the instructors as well. I could potentially create a virtual school. It's not really a business per se, but what it is for the instructors who are franchised to be able to teach that course, I want to see exactly what they're doing. I could make that a school as well. Okay. And so with my students, I go in here and I look at the students and I can see every student who is authorized, every school where I'm an authorized instructor, as their instructor, right? So as long as the school can teach the course that the student's enrolled in and the student has authorized the flight school, they're going to show up in this list. And if we take a look at it, we're going to see they all come from the Climb demo school. But let's say for the sake of argument that I showed up at work today and my boss says, well, here on the schedule, you're scheduled to teach Magneto's student, Maggie, my dog, she's got a test account. So the first thing I would do is I would come over here. Okay, I know that I'm looking for Magneto. I sort by name. We'll come on down. Here's Magneto. So I have Magneto's student who is enrolled in Rob's test course. I have Magneto's student who's enrolled in in the FAA instrument airplane rating course. Let's go ahead and look at that one. And I can dive into the course and I can immediately see where we sit in the environment. Okay. Couple of things that we can do here that are going to be pretty kind of neat, right? First thing is you're going to notice up here in the top right corner, it says that I'm not watching Magneto, right? So Maggie is not one of my students that I'm watching. But guess what? She just got assigned to me, right? So I'm going to go ahead and start watching Maggie. Now she's going to show up on my watch students list, which is going to make it a whole lot easier to find her, a whole lot easier to monitor and keep track of her as things move on. And then what I can do is I can come in here and I can immediately look and see what has Magneto completed. So what are the completed activities that she's done, right? I can see the instructor actions. I can see the knowledge activities. It doesn't look like there's all that many activities that have actually been completed. But when I go in here and I say, hey, let's go ahead and view this activity, right? What I can do is I can come down and I can actually see, was there a grade assigned to it? When was it completed? And kind of get a good understanding of, what has this student been up to? The whole idea is that we want to really ease the transition. When somebody gets that great job and moves on to that airline gig, and that next instructor comes in to go fly with a student, we want to make sure that that transition is just as simple and as easy as possible as we go. And we can do the same thing for flight activities. We can do the same thing for quizzes. We can do the same thing for every single piece of material that runs through this system. Okay. The other thing that we have is we have our instructor to-do list. And so the instructor to-do list lists all the things that I have to do as an instructor to teach this course, right? And these are primarily going to be administrative types of tasks. They may be things like the one that I have here is I have to do a TSA validation for Maggie, right? I would make sure that she's either a citizen or that she's gone through the TSA security screening process, right? The other thing that you may see up here a lot would be something like grading a quiz, right? Or grading a test or things like that. They're all going to pop up here on this page. So before I sit down with Maggie, I'm going to go ahead and pop up and say, oh, look, we have an instructor action here to do, right? That instructor action is we're going to do a TSA validation. So I can't do the TSA validation right now because Maggie's not with me. But what I can do is I can pop over here into the to-do list. I'm going to pull up just the instructor actions, just to do a quick little filter here. And you're going to see that we have the TSA validation here. And this is where I would go and say, hey, we're going to assign this as homework, right? And so now when Maggie comes in for school next time, right, Maggie should already know that we have this instructor activity as homework, i.e. look at the instructor activity, follow the directions, bring in a birth certificate or a passport or whatever the paperwork is that's actually required, right? And we can do lots of things with homework here. So the student to do here should look really familiar to you if you've looked at the student interface video. And the reason is it's exactly the same list. We use the same logic. We use a lot of the same things. The only difference here is if we come down here and say, I want to look for, let's find a knowledge activity. If I want to look for like a knowledge activity, right? And I drill into it, I can see the knowledge activity. I can get access to all the resources just like we did on the other one. But what I can never do is I can never complete it, right? And so it allows me to kind of get ahead of the student and make sure that I've actually read the materials that they're going to be working from. But obviously I can't go ahead and do the work for them, okay? Now the thing that we want to be doing here is we want to be coming over and looking at the flights. So the student doesn't really set up the flights. It's the job of the flight instructor to set up the flights. And we do this from this flight screen that we have, right? And the flight screen is broken up into two parts. We have upcoming flights, which is where flights have been scheduled. And then we have past flights, which are flights that have been already flown, right? And so we'll kind of run through the process of putting a flight together. So I go here and I go to create a flight, right? It's going to ask me for some basic information. What's the proposed date? We'll go ahead and fly today, right? What's the flight overview? We're going to do normal stuff. And then when I come down here, you're going to notice that I kind of have a couple of different menus here. Up here, I have available activities. Available activities are flight activities where I meet the prerequisites, right? If I come down a little bit further, we're going to have upcoming activities. These are activities that I haven't met the prerequisites for yet, but the only prerequisites are other flight activities. And so if I go ahead and I take all these activities, right, and I pop them into the program, and then I go ahead and I say continue, what's going to happen is we're going to basically fill up the rest of the flight with all the prerequisites for these activities. And within the app and within the software, it's going to limit you so you can't complete an activity unless you've already completed all the prereqs that go along with it, right? Another thing you'll see up here is we have these bolded ones and when we have these unbolded ones. The bolded ones are what we call pinned activities. So when I design a course, and this is up to the course designer, but when I design a course, the pinned activities tend to be the ones that we have to do every flight. We're going to do a takeoff. We're going to do a landing. We're going to do a pre-flight. We're going to do a briefing. We're going to, all those things that we're going to do, we want to make sure that they happen. And so what I can do is I can go ahead and put all those into the flight really, really quick and easily, right? And that way we know that way we know that we're doing the regular stuff, the stuff that needs to be monitored every time so that we're building the habit patterns that we want to be building. So now that we've created the flight, we go ahead and say continue. It's going to confirm that we're going to add some extra activities here because, hey, there were prereqs for those items. So we'll go ahead and say schedule the flight. And ta-da, we have now a flight with 21 planned activities in it. So we take that flight. Now what we may want to do is we may want to go ahead and we can edit it. We can delete it if we want to. Maybe the flight gets canceled. Hopefully what we're going to do is we're going to go view flight because this is where we go in to start actually going through the process of grading, right? So it'll ask us things like, what's the starting hobs? We're just keeping track of what's going on the thing. Maybe it's 1, 2, 3.0 hours on the hobs, and we'll go ahead and save that, right? And then we'll kind of come down here and we can dive into each and every activity that we have. So the first one we have here is it's a ground activity. It's a discussion-based activity, right? So we call them flight activities. It was probably a misnomer. They probably should have been called training activities because a lot of them are just ground-based discussions about things, right? But if I come over here and I say, view/submit, it's going to pull me into the display about that activity. And within this activity, this is a fully baked activity that we have here. It walks you through the I'm safe process. And so it describes kind of, what is the I'm safe process, how we go through it. There's instructor guidance. So this is guidance that the student can't see, right? One of the things as a developer that I like to do with instructor guidance is I put a lot of questions in there. I say, hey, here are some questions you might want to ask that could possibly, help you know if the student really understands the subject. In theory, the student's already done reading on the subject. In fact, we know that they've done reading on the subject because they wouldn't be able to hit the prereqs here, right? In this case, they have to have done the reading. They have to have done a quiz. And then now what they're able to do is they're going to go do the flight activity. And so instead of sitting down and explaining to the student about the I'm safe process, what you're really doing is you're talking to the student and evaluating how well does the student understand the I'm safe process, right? Likewise, because, hey, it would be wrong if we didn't do this, there's student guidance, right? These are the instructions that we give to the student that tells the student, hey, this is really what is going to be expected through this flight activity, right? Below that, we have completion standards. We very often pull these directly out of the airman certification standards. And so what we're looking at is what is it that we need the student to achieve for them to be graded as proficient? We'll often put in their tips and tricks. So the tips and tricks will show up if there's some way in which we can maybe do things a little bit better, right? And then finally, you can dig into the prerequisites and the post-requisites and the stuff that everybody else is kind of interested in, okay? Over here on the right side of the screen, what you're going to see is you're going to see a couple things. One, we have issues. And these are just common issues that people have, right? So for instance, they may not understand pilot certification. So I'll go ahead and check that off, right? They may not understand proficiency requirements or currency requirements or personal minimums, right? So what we've tried to do is we've tried to capture the most, up to 6 of the most common errors that we see on these activities. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a data set that says, where are people having problems? They've gone through the course. This should be a piece of cake. There shouldn't be any real issues here. If we start seeing patterns where we're always seeing issues around, I don't know, pilot certification, what that tells me is that maybe we need to go back and fix the training a little bit, right? And so it's a great tool for our course developers as we try to understand what's actually happening. We also do grading. So the grading is on a 5-point scale. It is customizable per course, but kind of the standard scale we use is what we see here. So it's a demonstrated, attempted, unassisted, safe, and proficient. And what we're targeting here is we're targeting for demonstrated means a flight instructor showed me how to do this, right? Attempted means you tried it, right? Unassisted says you went through the process of doing this without me having to tell you how to do it, right? Safe means you did it well enough. If you had to go do it solo, I'm pretty sure you're not going to have an accident, right? You may not be hitting anywhere close to ACS standards, but it's not a safety problem, right? And then the last one that we come to is proficient. Proficient means you're meeting ACS standards. As far as I'm concerned, you're good to go for the chuck ride, okay? First flight, you're not going to get a proficient on most things. It's just not going to happen, right? What we're doing is we're progressing through the process to get you towards proficient. And you're going to see the same activities popping up over and over. Within the system, sometimes the prerequisites are written so that I can do an activity if you've shown that you're safe or unassisted or some lower level of completion standard on a flight activity. I don't have to do slow flight to a fully proficient form to be able to do stalls. I do need to do slow flight before I can do stalls, right? So, kind of thing. And then I have the ability to come down here and go ahead and type in a comment, right? So if I go ahead, let's go back here. Let's say we grade this one as unassisted, and I'm just going to put in here, nice job, right? We do a save and return to flight, and you're going to see that it's now flagged here as having been done, right? What's really nice is once you've done something once, we're going to build a history. As an instructor, when you load that flight, you will see what the last grade was that somebody got on it. And so you can quickly tell, is the person improving? Is the person falling behind? Where are we standing in terms of these things, right? Once we're done, we'll go ahead and say finalize flights. Can ask me a couple more questions, right? So let's say we ended up at the 124.0 on the Hobbs. So it gives us a 1.0 flight. Let's say we went from Sanford, Maine to Sanford, Maine. And then it's going to ask me for a whole bunch of things, right? How many simulated instrument hours did we do? 0. Instrument flight training hours? 0, right? And we can go through here and put in things. We can put in a post-flight summary. We can put in instructor notes. So instructor notes are a way for us, maybe if you're flying with multiple different instructors, right? Or you're sharing a student with another instructor, you can pass a note to that instructor that the student doesn't see. Well, they do see it. What they're going to do is they're going to see it when they finish the course. So, keep it professional. Remember that this is not something that's, this is not a place to tell snarky jokes or anything like that. But it's a great way in which you can kind of set things up and say, hey, you know what, next time I recommend you do X, Y, or Z, right? And then we'll go ahead and put in our pin. If the student is there, you can have the student put their pin in because they have to see this. Otherwise, I can just say mark complete, and it'll show up in the student's in the student's record as something that they can see. And then now what we do is we come down here, we can do a review flight, and the review flight's going to show me all the information associated with that flight, right? And my flight activity experience is going to get updated, and all kinds of other good stuff's going to happen. Okay. A couple other things that we have down here. We have course progress. We've already seen course progress. This is pretty much the same thing that we had as the students, right? So if you want to dig into it, go over to the student video. And then we have reports. 2 of the reports here are exactly the same, right? So the flight activity heat map and the course summary report are both exactly the same as what we saw before. We also have enrollment information, because enrollment information contains all the information that you would need to be able to create like a Part 141 graduation certificate. Okay. And then over here, we have course documents. So for instance, when we did the TSA check, if I would have uploaded Maggie's birth certificate, right? Or if I upload photos of endorsements that I give them or things like that, I can go into course documents and just immediately download all the documentation associated with this student with this course to make things go ahead. So that's about it. It's a pretty straightforward and simple system. I think it collects a lot of the information that's going to make things useful for you. And better yet, right? It makes things available to you after the fact, so you can really see what's going on. You can improve your communication with your other instructors. The goal here is to make this as simple and as flexible and as usable as possible. And I hope you guys really enjoy it. If you want to talk about it, if you want to see a demo, if you have feedback for us, anything along those lines, I'm definitely going to push you guys towards the contact form that we have on the website. You can also shoot us an email at team@climb.aero. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get right back to you just as quickly as we can. Thanks and have a great day.